Everybody talks about compound interest like it's this magical force. You've probably heard the lines before. Just invest consistently. Let your money compound. Time in the market beats timing the market. It sounds simple, almost effortless. Like you just put money away, wait a little while, and suddenly wealth appears. But here's the part that nobody tells you. For a long time, it feels like absolutely nothing is happening. You invest for a year, maybe 2, maybe 5. You check your account expecting to see the famous power of compounding everyone keeps talking about, and instead you see numbers that feel underwhelming. Slow, small, disappointing, and quietly, a thought starts creeping in. Maybe this whole compounding thing only works for people who started 30 years ago. Maybe it only works if you already have a ton of money. Maybe it just doesn't work the way everyone says it does. I've been there, staring at the numbers, doing the math, wondering why the miracle of compound interest looked so ordinary. But here's the truth I eventually realized. Compounding isn't broken. It's just incredibly misleading in the beginning. Because the way compound growth actually works is completely different from how most people imagine it. The early years are painfully slow. And then suddenly, much later than you expect, everything starts accelerating. There's actually a pattern to this, a timeline. And once you see it, the frustration most people feel about compounding suddenly makes perfect sense. It's something I now call the 8-4-3 rule. And once you understand the 8-4-3 rule, you stop feeling like compounding is failing you and start realizing you might just be earlier in the timeline than you thought. Hey, I'm Brian, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, investing, and the strange psychology behind how wealth actually grows. Not the Instagram version, the real version. The slow, sometimes boring, sometimes frustrating process that almost nobody explains honestly. Because if I'm being completely transparent, there was a time when I thought compound interest was overrated. I was investing consistently, doing exactly what every finance book told me to do. And yet when I looked at the numbers, it felt like progress was crawling. It honestly made me question whether the math everyone talks about actually worked for normal people. Then one day I stumbled across a simple pattern buried inside compound growth. A pattern that changed the way I see investing forever. I call it the 8-4-3 rule. And the moment you understand the 8-4-3 rule, something strange happens. The early years of investing, the ones that feel the most discouraging, suddenly make perfect mathematical sense. Because compounding isn't slow. It's just backloaded. And the 8-4-3 rule explains exactly why. So let me show you what the 8-4-3 rule actually means. At its core, the 8-4-3 rule is just a pattern hidden inside compound growth. A pattern most people never notice because they stop too early. When you invest consistently, growth doesn't happen in a smooth straight line. It happens in phases. 3 phases, specifically. And the 8-4-3 rule describes how long each of those phases tends to take before the next one kicks in. The first phase takes about 8 years. 8 years of saving. 8 years of contributing. 8 years where the progress feels slow. You're putting money in every month. You're doing the right things. But when you look at the total, most of what you see is still the money you personally contributed. Your investments aren't doing most of the work yet. You are. Then something interesting happens. The second phase begins. And this one tends to last about 4 years. During these 4 years, the balance starts growing faster than it did in the first 8. You begin to notice something new in the numbers. Your returns are starting to matter. Not a little, a lot. And eventually you reach a moment that most investors never see coming. The moment when your investment returns start adding more money than your contributions. This is the crossover point. This is when compounding stops feeling theoretical and starts feeling real. Then comes the final phase. And according to the 8-4-3 rule, it only takes about 3 more years. Just 3. But those 3 years often create more growth than the entire first 8 years combined. Think about that for a second. 8 years of patient investing, followed by 4 years where things start speeding up, followed by 3 years where the numbers suddenly look completely different. That's the 8-4-3 rule. 8 years. For years. 3 years. And if you've ever felt like compounding was moving too slowly, there's a good chance you were simply somewhere inside that first 8-year phase. The part where your contributions are doing almost all the work. But this becomes much clearer when you actually see the numbers. So let's walk through a real example. If you're new here and just subscribed, comment your name below. I read every comment and shout out new subscribers in my next video. I do appreciate you joining me on this finance journey. Let's imagine someone decides to start investing today. Nothing fancy, no complicated strategies, just consistency. They invest $10,000 per year, every year. And let's assume their investments grow at an average of 12% annually. That's it. No tricks. Now let's see what happens. After the first year, they've invested $10,000. At 12% growth, the balance might be around $11,200. Nice, but nothing life-changing. After 3 years, they've contributed $30,000. Their total might be somewhere around $35,000. Again, good progress, but still very close to the money they personally put in. By year 5, they've contributed $50,000. Their account might be worth roughly $62,000. At this point, a lot of people start feeling discouraged. 5 years of discipline, and only about $12,000 of growth. This is the part nobody talks about, because the internet loves to show the final outcome of compounding. But the early middle? That part looks unimpressive. But remember the 8-4-3 rule. We're still inside the first 8 years. Now let's jump forward. After 8 years of investing $10,000 per year, our investor has contributed $80,000. The total balance at 12%? Right around $123,000. Now something interesting has happened. For the first time, the investment gains are starting to become noticeable. But the real shift is still ahead, because now the 4-year phase begins. Let's fast forward for more years. By year 12, the investor has contributed a total of $120,000. But the account balance is no longer close to that number. At 12% growth, the portfolio is now sitting around $241,000. Read that again. $241,000. In just 4 years, the account almost doubled. And something else happened here that changes everything. This is the crossover moment. For the first time, the investment returns have now generated more money than the investor contributed. The portfolio is officially doing more work than the person. This is where compounding begins to feel real. But the most surprising part of the 8-4-3 rule still hasn't happened yet. Because now we enter the final phase. Just 3 more years. By year 15, our investor has contributed a total of $150,000. But the portfolio value? Around $372,000. Think about what just happened. The first 8 years produced about $123,000. But the final 3 years alone added more wealth than most of that entire early period. That's the strange rhythm of compounding. Slow, then faster, then suddenly explosive. And the 8-4-3 rule captures that rhythm almost perfectly. 8 years of slow, visible progress. 4 years where momentum builds. 3 years where the numbers suddenly stop looking ordinary. And once you understand that pattern, the early frustration most investors feel starts making a lot more sense. Now let's peel back the curtain a little and see why this happens. The 8-4-3 rule isn't magic. It's just the natural rhythm of compound growth. And understanding the math makes it feel inevitable. We can break the journey into 3 simple phases, the same ones we just walked through: early, middle, and late. Phase 1 is the contribution-dominated phase. This is roughly the first 8 years. During this period, almost everything in your account is the money you're personally putting in. The investment returns are still small compared to your contributions. That's why it feels slow. Your money is literally too small for the compounding engine to kick in. Phase 2 is the transitional phase. Around years 9 to 12 in our example. Here's where things get interesting. Your contributions are still important, but the returns start to matter more. There's a shift in the ratio. Before, contributions were 80 to 90% of growth. Now, returns start to take over, inching closer to matching what you put in. Phase 3 is the return-dominated phase. That's the final 3 years in the 8-4-3 rule example. By this point, your contributions are almost secondary. Most of the growth comes from the returns themselves. This is why the last 3 years can create more wealth than the entire first 8 years combined. If you think in terms of an exponential curve, this makes sense. The curve starts almost flat. That's phase 1. Then it tilts upwards slightly in phase 2. And in phase 3, it shoots up. That's the characteristic shape of compounding. Slow, then accelerating, then explosive. The mechanics are simple when you break them down. Early on, the base is small. Small base, small returns. Later, the base is much larger. Same rate, but bigger base equals bigger growth. And the longer the base grows, the faster the returns snowball. The 8-4-3 rule just quantifies this pattern in a way that's easy to see and remember. 8 years of contribution-dominated growth. 4 years of transition. 3 years of return-dominated acceleration. Once you internalize this, you start to realize something powerful. The early frustration isn't a problem. It's mathematically expected. Here's the part that almost everyone misses. Most people quit before they ever reach the good stuff. They get frustrated in that first phase, the 8 years of contribution-dominated growth. They look at their account and think, is this even working? Maybe I'm not cut out for investing. This is the psychological trap. The early phase of compounding feels painfully slow. You don't see the results you expected, so your motivation collapses. And remember, this is the exact period that leads directly into the crossover point where the math starts working in your favor. The truth is, this frustration is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of the math. Most people interpret early slow growth as failure. But in reality, the early phase is completely normal. It's the foundation. Without it, there is no phase 2 or 3. Without patience through this slow start, the explosive returns later simply never happen. This is also why the 8-4-3 rule is so helpful. It gives you a map. It tells you, hey, if your account doesn't feel like it's moving yet, you're still in phase 1. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Understanding this trap is critical, because the moment you stop worrying about the early numbers and keep showing up, that's exactly when you position yourself to benefit from the snowball effect. In other words, quitting too early is the only reason most investors never see the dramatic growth compounding promises. Let me make this real for you. Meet 2 investors, Rebecca and Marcus. They both start investing at the same time. Same age, same income, same plan. They each put in $10,000 a year, exactly like our example before. Rebecca stays consistent. Every year, she contributes. Even when the account feels slow, even when the growth looks underwhelming, she trusts the process. She knows about the early phase of compounding, even if she doesn't call it the 8-4-3 rule yet. Marcus, he's different. He gets frustrated in the first 5 years. He's staring at his account thinking, I've been disciplined. Why isn't this making me rich yet? He quits, stops contributing. Maybe he dips in and out. Maybe he takes a break. The details don't matter. The point is, he gives up before the crossover moment. Fast forward 15 years. Rebecca has stayed the course. She's contributed a total of $150,000 over those 15 years. But her account? It's grown to about $380,000. That's the power of the 8-4-3 rule in action. 8 slow years for building momentum, 3 explosive years at the end. Marcus? He contributed the same amount early on, but stopped after 5 years. His total? Only about $170,000. Half of what Rebecca has. Think about that. Same starting point. Same contributions at first. Same discipline early on. The only difference? Rebecca didn't quit. She trusted the process. She stayed consistent through the boring, slow phase. That gap, $210,000, is entirely the result of patience and consistency, not strategy, not luck. The 8-4-3 rule explains it all. The wealth wasn't missing from Marcus. He just exited the timeline before the returns really kicked in. Rebecca's story proves something important. Most of the drama in investing isn't about picking stocks or timing the market. It's about showing up for the timeline the math is already following. So, what can you do today, starting right now, to take advantage of the 8-4-3 rule? Step 1. Identify which phase you're in. If your portfolio feels slow, small, or underwhelming, congratulations. You're in the first 8 years. This is normal. The growth is contribution-dominated. Expect it to feel like work. Step 2. Adjust your expectations. Stop looking at the balance like it should be doubling every year. That's not how compound growth works early on. The numbers may feel boring, but mathematically, they're setting you up for massive gains later. Step 3. Set milestone goals. Focus on reaching the crossover point, about year 12 in our example. Or, if you're tracking shorter periods, set checkpoints like every 3 to 4 years to celebrate growth. These milestones make the long game feel tangible. Step 4. Stay consistent. Even small contributions matter. Keep adding every month. Ignore the temptation to quit during the slow, contribution-heavy phase. Consistency is the secret engine behind the 8-4-3 rule. Step 5. Track the snowball. Watch how returns gradually begin to overtake contributions. This is your cue that you've entered the transitional phase. Once you notice this, you'll understand why all the early discipline mattered. The key here is action. Don't get paralyzed by early results. Show up, contribute, and trust the timeline. The math is already in your favor. The 8-4-3 rule isn't theory. It's a roadmap you can follow to see compounding finally start working for you. Here's the final thing I want you to take away. Stop looking backward at the small, early numbers in your account. That part of the story is already written. The modest gains in the first years are just the foundation. They are the quiet setup for what's coming next. Instead, start projecting forward. Picture where the curve is heading. Imagine the crossover point, the moment when your returns begin doing more work than your contributions. Imagine those 3 explosive years at the end of the 8-4-3 rule timeline, where the growth suddenly feels unreal. That's not fantasy. That's math. The wealth is already locked in. It's just invisible until the timeline reaches it. You've already planted the seeds. Now it's time to let the snowball roll. Most people quit before compounding shows up. They miss out because they let frustration dictate action. But if you understand the 8-4-3 rule, you realize something powerful. The wealth isn't missing. It's already there. It's just waiting for the right time to become visible. So keep contributing. Keep showing up. Stop obsessing over the early numbers. And trust the timeline. 8 years of groundwork. 4 years of momentum. 3 years of acceleration. That's the rhythm of compounding. That's the 8-4-3 rule. The moment you internalize this, everything changes. You no longer chase results. You ride the curve. And that's when compounding finally stops feeling slow and starts feeling inevitable. Because here's the truth. You don't have to do anything more than what you're already doing. You just have to stay in the game. And once you do, the math does the rest. The wealth isn't a maybe. It's already mathematically on its way. And now, so are you.